Okay, John, you have been an advocate for many important contemporary issues. You've been unafraid to confront important and controversial topics. Hope you don't mind discussing these further today.
Absolutely not.
As it's the eve of the Euros, we've only got 17 days left. France's World Cup in 2018 was regarded as a justice for the nation's multiracial side. The multicultural French World Cup winners provoked an online debate about racism and immigration. Do you think success for England at this summer's Euro 2020 could help remedy racism in this country?
Well, first of all, it's not a contemporary issue. This issue has been around for hundreds of years. And when the issue first started, many hundreds of years ago, if you want to talk about in modern times, in the 60s, for example, the civil rights movement, as much as we can go back to the abolition of slavery, they said they're contemporary issues, and we're saying the same thing now, because things hasn't necessarily changed. So I'll use the South African rugby team as an example, who won the World Cup with one black player, Chester Williams, in 1997, and that was a change. Nothing changed, even in South Africa, which is a black country, for the people in Joburg, in the inner cities, and all over South Africa. They then wanted to get in 2009, 12 years later, with 7 black players. And this was a change because they had 7 black players in the team for racial equality. How great are things? Nothing changed for the people. And they wanted again, 2018, or whenever they won the World Cup, with a black captain. And they said, what has changed is for the elite. Nothing changes for the masses, which is the same as you're looking at working class people who, from the Magna Carta, or the French Revolution, or the American Revolution, was a revolution for the people, the working class people, which it wasn't. It was about a group of semi-elite people wanting more power from the elite. So, I'm not meant to give you a bit of a history lesson, but nothing changes. Nothing changes. What will change, you'll see more black people on television. And you'll see more black elite people getting into these positions. But nothing changes for the masses. So, I remember Gareth Southgate saying that this is a new diverse England squad, because they had 8 or 9 black players in the squad. They had 8 or 9 black players in the squad when I played in 1984. And then when they had Paul Leeds, the first black captain, with Rio Ferdinand, Sol Campbell, they had 9 or 10 black players. We had 9 or 10 black players playing in the team for England, and nothing changes. So, of course, we can spin this story because it's modern to then say, isn't this great, because look how inclusive and diverse we actually are. Nothing has changed.
Today actually marks the 1-year anniversary since George Floyd's murder. And you've come out in support of Wilfried Zaha's decision not to take the knee after the Crystal Palace player described it as degrading. Recently, players such as Paul Pogba and Hamza Choudhury have attracted both praise and criticism for displaying their support of Palestine following their respective matches. Is the pitch the right platform for footballers to express their personal opinions and beliefs? Should it always be encouraged, no matter how controversial?
If they want to make a stand or express their opinions, they have to know what they're doing. Not just do a popular fist bump, taking a knee, support of Palestine. Do they understand the history of Palestine? Do they know how it came about? Do they know what's actually going on there? And I don't think they do. Because, of course, it's fine to take a knee, and we're talking about whether I didn't support Wilfried Zaha necessarily not taking a knee, because I said I would support players who take a knee. I'd support them not taking a knee. What is being done? Because all that is just a token gesture to highlight the issue. That's doing nothing to get rid of the issue. We used to pass the red card, show racing the red card along the line for the Champions League for the last 25 years. All you do is you pass it along. Nothing else is done. And this is what we're doing now. So now we're discussing whether it's right to take a knee or not to take a knee. What are the issues behind why you're taking a knee, and what's being done about it? So the tangible difference that can be made is the real issue, not whether you should be taking a knee or not. So as I said, I don't care whether you take a knee. I don't care whether you don't take a knee. I don't support you one way. I'll support you either way. But what else are you doing? And that's why I use Marcus Rashford as an example to show what you should use your platform and your profile for, to make tangible change. And as much as this may not be a race issue, but it's an underprivileged issue, to make tangible change to underprivileged people by changing government policy towards it by using your platform. I'm not talking about how terrible it is for a Romanian referee official to say the black man, or some 12-year-old boy who throws a banana on the field. That is not the problem in racism. The problem in racism is the unspoken and the unseen and unheard racism that nobody's addressing. All we're doing is looking at the obvious forms of racism or discrimination, be it homophobia or sexism, and feeling that that's what we have to deal with.
Yeah, of course, and that, it's been a year of a season of players taking the knee, but yet in the first game back for Wolves at the weekend, we saw the BT pundit Rio Ferdinand get racially abused in the first game back for fans. What should be the punishment for any fans in the stadium to commit this crime of racially abusing players of minorities?
Once again, people who want to talk about punishments can come up with whatever punishment they want. That's not going to change anything. Because as I said, it's been illegal to rape and kill and murder for 1,000 years. That hasn't stopped them doing it. If you look at the incarceration rates in America, where you have people on the death row, death penalty, people in prison, life imprisonment, has that been a deterrent? Punishments aren't a deterrent. They have to understand why it's wrong. And how are you going to understand why it's wrong? I understand why people are racist or racially biased and why they're sexist because of what we have been wrongly told about different groups of people. I am biased. When I see, and I know people will never admit this, but when I see two referees walk onto the field, one's male, one's female, do I think the man is better than the woman? Yes. Because of the way I've been conditioned to think. And that's what I challenge, the way I've been conditioned to think, to change it. People won't admit that. They'll go, no, I see them as the same. Whereas we don't. And until we're going to admit it, nothing will change. All we do is wait for someone to get caught in saying something, then we come down hard on him.
Excellent. Yeah, it's a very, very, very good point. I mean, last month we saw, I think it was last month or the month before, English football took a week-long social media blackout. And that's basically what you've been advocating. It's not just a stance or a platform, it's actually educating. We should be educating more than doing these trends or popular.
Well, what did that do? What did that week-long do? We're getting more of it now. So has it had an effect? And this is where things like that cannot work. That's not going to change people's perception. Those trolls, whatever you call them, I don't even know the modern term for it because I'm a bit old. But all they are insignificant people who do not count, who have no effect on racism. They're not the reason why there's knife crime. They're not the reason why there's lack of education or housing or access to social care. They're not the reason why a woman, when two black men come towards her, hold her hand back tightly. Or somebody working in a newsagent will look at the black kid with a hoodie because he thinks he's going to steal something. They're insignificant people, and we were spending so much time focusing on that and saying that's the issue, when it's not the issue. That's not the issue because it does nothing. Football can do nothing to get rid of racism or any kind of discrimination. It can it can highlight it, which is what we're doing, but it has to be done in society. The more we just absolve ourselves of responsibility to look at what happens in society and spend millions and millions and hours worrying about a fourth official saying the black man and worrying about a 12-year-old boy rather than looking at situations in the inner cities. And secondly, if we want to talk about it from a footballing perspective, the elephant in the room, when you talk about racial equality and racial discrimination, there are no black managers. Why aren't the black players talking about that and taking a knee for that? They're taking a knee for a Bulgarian racist fan, whereas when you have, for example, the opportunity to promote, albeit temporarily, Chris Powell or Ledley King to take over for the last 5 games, which is nothing, at Tottenham, you give it to Ryan Mason, who coached the under-18s for a year, whereas Chris Powell's been coaching and managing for the last 6, and no one bats an eyelid and no one says anything because they're afraid to say anything because they will get criticised because they're criticising the system. So as much as all these advocates, these black advocates on Sky and the pundits are talking about, but everyone's afraid to talk about that because you don't want to criticise the institution who furnishes you. So I haven't got time for this whole fight against racism and the high-profile elite talking about our turbulence in Montenegro and these players are taking a knee about some fan who threw a banana on the field. What about, they'll be ex-players who may want to be managers and no one's talking about that. On Sky, you hear them saying, I'm in. They don't even discuss it on Sky. Every now and again, we'll all be on Sky. They'll get lots of black pundits on Sky saying there are no black managers or it's a disgrace. We don't mention it again. We don't talk about why. We don't have the debate. We don't analyse why that is. But we'll analyse till the cows come home a Romanian fourth official who says the black guy when there's nothing wrong with that.
Exactly, and that extends to, from what you were saying, it was going through my head, there's no black referees, there's no hardly any black owners in the Premier.
First of all, you cannot change the system, and you cannot get into the system to change it from within. As you look at all of those revolutions I spoke about, we're only talking about changing the system from within. Once you get into that system, you can't change it. And if you use a very topical and current example, you look at the ESL. Agnelli at Juventus, Ed Woodward at Manchester United, and Perez at Real Madrid. They work with UEFA. They're the most powerful men in UEFA. These are the 3 most powerful clubs. Why can't they work with UEFA to change things for the better of those 3 clubs or the elite clubs? Because they know in an existing system, you can't. You have to leave it. That's why they wanted to leave. Brexit. Not a question of whether it's right or wrong. England have got over 80 MEPs, the second most powerful country in the EU. They have 80 people representing their interest. They know they can't change within that system. So what do they have to do? We have to leave the EU. This is not a question of whether it's right or wrong, but to change that system, that's what we have to do. Why do we feel as black people that we can get into the system and change it for ourselves, when that has never worked throughout history? So therefore, all this idea about we need more black people in positions of power, we need more women in positions of power, no, not at all. They will just become part of the system. And what will happen is that they will make things better for themselves individually, but nothing will change for the masses. So all of this stuff that we're doing in terms of fighting equality, be it for females, be it for trans, be it for travelers, be it for black people, we're doing it the wrong way.
Oh, that was excellently answered. Thank you. Can I go on to talk to you about the ESL as you brought it up? Of course, last month we saw the creation and swift temporary demise of the European Super League, and where the 9 of the instigators who eventually backed out now face fines of 100 million euros. Now this leads on to what you're saying about the system. Is this a sufficient punishment for these clubs? Is it even a punishment? Should they be docked points?
Have they paid 100 million fine?
Not that I'm aware of.
Are they going to pay 100 million fine? No, they're not. No, they're not. Because it's, if you do it again, then you got 100 million fine. So what they'll do something different. Because this will come back again. They did it in the wrong way. So of course, if they do this again in the same way, they may be fined. But of course, straight after what happened, Klopp and Guardiola both came out and said we don't like the Champions League as it stands, because they're going to play too many matches for not much more money. That's the problem. This was an attack on UEFA, not on the Premier League. It was framed as if it's a Premier League problem, whereas it wasn't. The Premier League would continue exactly the same way. Promotion, relegation would not have impacted on it at all. Certain elite people got very nervous because they felt that this will take away from us in terms of sponsorship, in terms of the profile we will have, because if Amazon or someone like that then come and took this on, then certain companies, not to be mentioned, will be affected by that. So they're the ones who drove this whole thing. It shouldn't happen, it shouldn't happen, it shouldn't happen. Now, as I said, why did it happen? What's the difference between what happened now and what happened in 92 when the Premier League started? And you may say there's no promotion and relegation, but this is not affecting the Premier League. There's still be promotion and relegation. This is just a European competition, which means the Premier League will continue in the exact same way, promotion, relegation, but not everybody can go into this new league, which would then mean, how would that affect UEFA? If these clubs left UEFA to play in this new league, the Champions League will still be there, but who will it be? Rosenborg and the so-called lesser teams. So this was. Now, when we're talking about punishments, we can talk as much as we want about what we're going to do to these big clubs. These elite clubs have all the power. You think about it from a sponsorship point of view. So let the Premier League kick them out of the league. Do you think the sponsors are going to be concerned when there's no Arsenal, Liverpool, Man United, Chelsea, Tottenham? Do you think the sponsors are going to pay the Premier League money? They are. In fact, I would like to say to them, please kick them out and give them to me, John Barnes, in my little house here. Let me take these around the world. Do you not think the sponsors will come with me and pay me more money than they're paying you? So therefore, forget this rubbish trying to fool people that we've got the power, or they have the power to change that. Secondly, FIFA. Let's ban them from the World Cup. So there's no Ronaldo, Messi, any of the top players. So the World Cup is going to have players from where? Do you think the sponsors for FIFA will then give them the money for that? So this whole idea of we've got the power and we're going to have a fan representation and a fan forum and fans now on the boards of clubs and having the illusion, very much like this 100 million. That's what they're going to do. They're going to say, let's have a little fan delegation now. They're not going to have any power. And why should they? Because if I've paid 300 million for this club, £3 billion, do you think that you as a fan can come onto my board and tell me what to do with my money? This is what the fans wanted. We started off, I don't know if it was with you or the one before, talking about the Saudis buying Newcastle.
Yeah, it was my colleague.
Yeah. We want fan representation. We want it to be a people's club. But if someone comes with billions, we don't care who they are. We'll take the money, thank you very much. But then we want to tell them what to do. It doesn't work that way. It never has. So you can frame it to whichever way you want, and you can try and kid people. And of course, government getting involved. Boris is just more concerned with just not asking where that £58,000 comes from for his flat. So he'll say, yes, we're going to get a fan thing. Come and see me. Of course, we then forget about the real issue of what he's actually done. And this is what we do. We just deflect from issues by hoping for something else to come along. So this whole government policy of we're going to now take over football and have an independent regulatory body, that's not going to happen either. But as soon as something else happens, we'll forget about that, because something else will happen further down the line.
Like sleight of hand techniques, right?
It's been happening for hundreds of years, and we're too stupid to see it.
Well, it's interesting because I've written down that word that you use quite well, illusion. Now, as a player, as a man who experienced the change from the old First Division to the Premier League, has your perspective changed over time in seeing that evolved, or were you wary of it at the time in 1992?
I wasn't aware of it in 1992 because I wasn't as historically or politically aware as I am now, in that when we all think something is new is happening, and we've seen it on GMB and since George Floyd, this is new, this feels different, this feels different. They were saying that for the last 200 years. Abolition of slavery, this feels different, nothing changed. American Civil War, every revolution that's happened, and within this feels different. Nothing has changed. So of course in 92, it felt a bit different. And of course the ESL didn't happen, but people say that feels different. So what I've become more aware of is the fact that it's just more elitism, about people who want to be elite, wanting more power for themselves, and then framing it as it's good for the people. Because in fact, the whole ESL narrative from Perez's point of view, from Real Madrid, is that this will trickle down to help the good of football, which is what the Premier League said, but it really didn't. And now you have some people on one side saying it's bad for football because the money won't trickle down. He's saying the money will trickle down. Who's right? It's two elite groups wanting to keep hold of power. That's all it is. That's all it is. And I've become much more aware of that in the last 5 years. So to answer your question, was I aware of it in 92? No, I thought it was great because, of course, we were still quite hopeful and altruistic that it's going to be for the good of football, for grassroots football. And because if you look at even at the elitism of the academies, which has affected the local clubs, because every kid now goes to the academy, and that's to the detriment of the local clubs who once upon a time could have an affiliation with a club, because you've got a player playing for your local club here in Heswell and you could be playing for Liverpool. That's now gone. So the elite aspect of the world, forget about, you look at reality TV shows. Everybody wants to be elite, and then say they're an average person who just wants to help everybody else, and that's not the reality.
Yeah, definitely that thing about the academy teams. I mean, I go and watch Altrincham, and we now have to get the trickle-down effect. The players who are looking for the last chance rather than have any connection. Manchester United's only a couple of miles down the road.
Yeah, yeah. Because of course, once upon a time, I had players maybe going from there to Manchester United, not the other way around. And why that is because what they do at football clubs now, especially with the academies, is they take everybody. You would have thought that it was the elite going to the academies. It's not. They take everybody. Then they take the elite out of everybody so they don't miss anybody, and the rest of them, forget about them. So that's when all of a sudden they trickle down to then become disenfranchised, disillusioned, because they thought they'd be playing for Manchester United. And as I said, since in the last 20 years, I've been traveling all over the world and traveling around, and you hear, dad saying my son's at this academy, and he's going to make it for Man United. He's 7 years old, and I said, well, probably not. He's going to end up playing for his local club. He will be disappointed. He will be depleted because as a youngster, he thinks he's going to play for Man United at 7. By the time he gets to 12, he's going to be rejected. And what's that going to do to his development as a human being, as a child, as a young man? And we are doing our children a disservice by making them feel they're all going to be professional players playing for Manchester United and Liverpool and Arsenal, whereas stay with your local club, play for whoever you want to play for. When you get to 14, 15, if you're good enough, you're still going to make it. Whereas if you're not in an academy by the time you're 8, people are telling you you're a failure. And if you're in an academy by the time you're 8, everyone's telling you you're going to be the new Wayne Rooney, when you're not. 99.9% of you aren't. Particularly in an environment in England whereby we're signing the best foreign players anyway, signing the best foreign kids at 16 anyway, never mind the local kids, so it's even harder. And then looking at every Mason Mount or a superstar player who makes it and say it's a good idea, but for the other 99.9% of them, they aren't.
It's like at the moment this renewed talk about Jamie Vardy's film on his career, and the fact that stands out as an interesting career. It should actually, because it's an anomaly, talks more about the structure of the game, coming up from that.
But people want to use that as an example of what can be done, which is crazy, because Obama was the first black president, so therefore we can all be great, can't we? No, we can't. He's an exception. So people like use that as an example and say, see, it can be done. What has to happen is you have to create an environment for more people to be able to do it. Don't use the odd example and say, see, it can be done. Because it's becoming increasingly harder and harder and harder for that very reason. Jamie Vardy would not have made it. Now, he would not make it. Now, you're not going to go, which player is going to come from Fleetwood or down there to make it to the top? No player is, even from a young age. So once again, this is an illusion of what can be achieved, which For the very, 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 very few can be. However, my thing is let's create an environment to make it easier for more of them to do that. But no one's doing that. All we're doing is pointing to the odd person who makes it and say, see, that woman made it, that gay guy made it, that black guy making it. So you can. That's not what we have to do.
Excellent. Do you think that English football can actually rectify itself to become a game of the people again, or do you think the process is too irreversible? Is it too far down the line now?
No, it's too far down the line. Because that's the way life is. Football isn't different to anything else. And I'll use English football as an example because you listen to all of these Sky pundits and they say, it's great for English football, 2 teams in the Champions League. Why are there 2 teams in the Champions League? Why teams did well in the Champions League before was because the European Cup, when England, Liverpool, whoever in the 70s, when they were all English players or British players and Spain had all Spanish players, then all of a sudden you had the Italian teams come because all of the best foreign players went to Italy. Then all of a sudden the best foreign players came to England. So when the best foreign players came to England, the England teams picked up once again. Then because teams went to Barcelona and Real Madrid and they then picked up in the 2010s up until the last 4 or 5 years, what has worked now for England is because we've got the best foreign players and we've got the best foreign managers. Before we had Guardiola and Klopp, we weren't winning the Champions League really and getting to the finals. Now all of a sudden we've got the best foreign players, we get the best foreign managers. Great for English football. How many English players? How many English managers? So it's English football, but how many English representation are there? So of course on Sky we'll be talking about that because no one then thinks about English managers. Forget about black managers. Even white English managers aren't being given a chance at the very highest level, which they will tell you. So I'll say to everybody on those pundits, you know what? Let's get some foreign pundits. So you got English managers, foreign managers, foreign players, all foreign pundits. Would you be happy then on talking about how great it is in England? When all of a sudden Sky have got all German and Italian and French pundits, I think we'll be talking about this is a disgrace because we should have English representation. So that is why when people talk about how great it is in English or how great English football is it English football? Does that show the success of England and what England can actually do and England can produce? Because we've got the best foreign managers and the best foreign players, which is why we're successful. What will happen is we've got good young English players being part of these teams, not the main parts of the teams. So therefore the young English players will get success at Manchester City and Liverpool will win the Champions League, but they're not the main players in those teams winning the Champions League. Then when we play for England, we then go, well, you know, they're doing it for our club, why can't we do it for England? And that's a disadvantage that England has. Whereas in other countries who may not have as many foreign players, those countries are better. Look at Germany. How well they do because they have to have German players because they don't have many foreign players playing there. So to get the balance right between this whole national identity of wanting to be successful and the club, we don't necessarily have that balance right at the moment to the detriment of the national team.
Excellent. I mean, recently, you were speaking about pundits there. Recently, Alex Scott has been announced as the Football Focus host. And now this is separated between people saying, brilliant, more representation on TV. And then you have the detractors who go, she's only there for this reason.
Alex Scott's a very good presenter. And of course, there would have been some tokenism in that because, of course, to give the illusion that we're being inclusive, they'll do that, which is fine because she deserves that job because she's very good. But then don't say that that's better, that's going to help women all over the world because it's not. It'll help her, it'll help Kelly Cates, and it'll help a few more elites, but that's not changing anything for women. Very much like Obama being the president of America, first black president, Frank Rijkaard being the first black manager to win the Champions League 20 years ago hasn't helped. So let's not pretend that that is really going to help anything. That's not going to help anything. You'd much rather have more average women in other positions than a superstar woman in the top position. We had Theresa May as the Prime Minister. That didn't help women. So once again, I'm glad for Alex, but in terms of thinking that that is going to change things for women, that is not what we need. We need more representation in average positions.
Beautiful. Yeah, of course. What is your hope to see the English football in 10 years from now? I mean, you've talked about 20, 30 years ago where all the best players went to Italy and all the best players came to us. Where do you see our game going? Yeah.
Well, it depends what you determine English football is. English football is kind of the clubs or the country. And the way that the country has been going since the Premier League has been we have regularly qualified and got to the quarterfinals, semi-finals at best. Good young English players coming through who play for their clubs, and that's going to continue. That's nothing new. So this new, when Gareth Southgate said in 2014, this new diverse England team, it was never diverse or new. There's nothing new going on now. What the difference is that when I played, the top England players were the top players for their clubs. Brian Robson, Glenn Hoddle, Peter Shilton, Gary Lineker, they were the top players for their clubs. The top England players now are not the top players for their clubs. Raheem Sterling, top player for England, he's not a top player at Manchester City. You know, okay, you do have Harry Kane at Tottenham, but apart from Harry Kane, the rest of them are really decent players for the top clubs, but they're not the top players at their clubs. So how is the national team going to improve? Which is what Germany had to do by promoting these German players into the top clubs in Germany, Bayern Munich mainly, which then, and I spoke to Oliver Bierhoff about this, and he said we then had to take a step back to then say we had a lot of top foreign players in Bayern Munich particularly, and he said we had to put in Schweinsteigers, the Ozils, before they were ready. We knew that they weren't necessarily going to do well straight away, but after a few years, a bit like what Arteta is doing at Arsenal, if he's given the time, then you can see the benefit of that. Whereas we don't want that in England, because you asked Liverpool, Arsenal, Manchester United, Chelsea, Tottenham, who they're concerned about England or their clubs, and they say we were concerned about our clubs, we don't care about England. England supporters have always been, you go to Wembley in the old days, and they're all supporting Doncaster and Crewe and Swindon, you see all the flags. You don't see Liverpool, Arsenal, Man United flags when England play. And those fans demand the best at their club. So they're not saying put the young kids in and then give them time to develop. And as I said, for every Phil Foden who they will give that time to because he's a superstar like a Wayne Rooney, you have other kids who will not be given that time because they want to get the best players for their team. So English football will be exactly where it is now. Good young England players coming through, not necessarily being the top players at their club, and the foreign players meaning that, and the foreign managers meaning that the club teams will be the best teams in Europe and best teams in the world, but the national team will always do well, don't get me wrong, but they won't maximize their potential.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's when you answered that question to begin with, immediately triggered, English football now is just about geography. It's a very shallow.
We don't have an identity. When you talk about, even from Spain's point of view, you have a Catalan identity, or Barcelona, or you have, the Basque identity of Atletico Bilbao and Sociedad, or the Spanish identity. So they do have an identity of this is who we are. Whereas in England, we really, very much like you talk about, go back to the Newcastle situation. Geordies would love to see 11 Geordies playing for Newcastle with a Geordie manager. That's what the Geordie identity is. But maybe you can get some Saudis to own us and get the best club to come and manage us and get the best foreign players. We'll take that. We'll take that. So football has lost its identity in England.
Lovely. Can I just ask you to step aside from reality for a moment? What would be your ideal image and model of a top-tier club? If you could...
A top-tier club would be, for me, one or two superstars from anywhere in the world, 3 or 4 players from anywhere else in the world who may not be superstars, they could be wherever, and the rest of them are local players. When I say local, not necessarily from your city or your town, but being part of the community where they came from, because they can be good enough given time. And it's interesting to see that Borussia Dortmund are doing that with a lot of young English players. Sancho, Bellingham. And they're looking to get young English players who they know won't be given an opportunity at their clubs. So therefore we're going to take them and then we're going to sell them back to their clubs for 100 million. So why don't their clubs do that with them? Imagine if we could do that here. And we can, if we're given the time, because the Dortmund fans would accept that. They won't say we're going to spend hundreds of £millions on these players to make us great. And they're a big club, Borussia Dortmund always have been, because they like the identity of having young German players mainly. But of course, if they can get young players coming in, they like to see their development. And they will give the manager and that situation time to develop, whereas in England we don't. As much as we say we do, we don't.